chopping it up good today with my friend Gary Brecka. This is a Life Network expert replay. Gary's one of the top minds in longevity and health optimization. From his days modeling mortality in the insurance industry to 10x Health, Gary breaks down the biomarkers that matter most in this show and how oxygen movement and genetics all tie into living longer and stronger. All the resources are going to be at bengreenfieldlife.com/LN Gary. Gary is featured as one of our experts within the Life Network. So check it out at bengreenfieldlife.com/LN Gary. And learn more about all our Life Network featured experts at joinlifenetwork.com. So, all right, folks, I'm here with Gary Brecka. We're finally doing it. We've spent, this morning so far has been fantastic.
Oh, my God.
I don't know if every morning for you has been, but let's give folks the rundown just in case they're curious.
Super biohacking morning.
So for those of you who are not familiar with Gary or who didn't listen to my introduction to Gary for this podcast, he knows a lot about human biology, in particular how to harness a lot of the elements of things like air and light and water and electricity to optimize the body. And so we began today with some beautiful breath work out in the sunshine.
Amazing. That was great.
We
led by yourself.
Snorted a little hape and then did a little kind of like a pranayama-esque breath work session. You did some Agasku stretching.
Yeah.
And we got time. We can go through your whole little morning routine because it's fantastic.
Sure.
Tell me about the Agasku stretching, why you start that off.
It's just a postural realignment, pigeon toeing the feet in and then using some rear circles with your delts to put some stress on the delts and kind of realign the traps and changes the kyphotic and lordotic curve in the spine, get the cerebrospinal fluid going, and then you'd use a pursed hand pressed over top of your head, staring right at your middle fingers to just kind of stretch and get that cerebrospinal fluid going. I mean, the credit really goes to Agasku, not to me, and I use it every morning as a way to warm up for breath work or cool down after.
We have a mutual friend, Brian. Is it Brian? Is that his name?
It's Brian.
With Agasku?
Can't remember his last name.
Sorry, Brian, if you're listening. But anyways, I had discovered Agasku when someone had mentioned it to me on a podcast, and there's a little 5-minute video on YouTube. It's like 5 minutes to banish low back pain or something like that. And some of those moves we did out on your porch this morning.
I learned them
fantastic.
I went to a Tony Robbins event, and then afterwards I met Brian.
Yeah.
And Brian gave me just some simple realignment techniques to use on a daily basis, and I've used them every day since.
Well, Brian taught my sons, my twin sons, how to do some of these exercises. And we went to a Tony Robbins event in New Jersey, and where we're sitting out there, with whatever 50,000 people in the stadium, and he asked if the Greenfield boys can come up. They were like 9 years old. They got up there on stage with all the flash bulbs in the arena, and I still have a little video of it. They're up there on stage leading the whole arena through the Agasku exercises.
Yeah.
And amazing. I still throw them. I don't know about you, but I do little movement snacks throughout the day.
I do too. I believe in snacking on exercise. Yeah. I think that's just one of the greatest tools.
Yeah.
Just to stay mentally clear and alert and physically focused. I say physically focused too, because if you're not in physically good shape, or your body's tired, your mind's tired.
Yeah.
So snacking on exercise throughout the day is an amazing way to just keep a level of clean, clear, cognizant, kind of waking energy sustained throughout the day.
Yeah, and even though we'll get into some of the sexy biohacking technologies, you got some amazing tools sprinkled around your house that I think people will absolutely be intrigued with. What I appreciated about you, and I haven't hung out so much, but what I appreciated about you was one of the very first things we did after the breath work was we went outside. We connected with nature, not just the technologies. Tell me about what your morning walk routine is like.
So right across from me, right below the...
Careful, everybody's going to know where you live now.
Yeah. 1000 Museum in Miami. But right across is a huge open-air park. It's got a dog park in the middle, museums on either side, and 2/3 of it surrounded by water. So in the mornings, I go out there, take my shoes off, and I do these squares around the park. And I call it 4 corners. And at each corner, I just do a different basic exercise, some of which I learned from you this morning. But an air squat, a stretching move, a push up, a static squat hold, plank. And at each one of those corners, it makes the walk go fast. It breaks it up. You're not crushing your body. It's a great way to wake up. I'm a big believer in earthing and grounding because we actually discharge into the earth, as you know.
Which you did. You slipped your shoes off.
Took my shoes off.
I didn't have to, neener, because I was wearing the cheating sandals, the Earth Runner sandals with the carbon.
I'm in downtown Miami, so God knows.
I told you, I'm strange. I don't know where all the syringes and the condoms are. I keep the feet shod.
Yeah.
And I was telling you, they even make these straps now. They're called Earth, ERTHE. You put them on any existing tennis shoe, and they turn the shoe, a cross train or whatever, and they earth it, they ground it.
I'm all about that.
That's an option to go with. But you take your shoes off, and you walk around the park after that.
I walk around the park. I do some breath work at first light in the morning, and I love the sun comes right up over Miami Beach, right off the horizon of that water. So I do breath work in the morning. I do that Egoscue method. Usually I have a cup of black coffee, or maybe with a little fresh organic coconut powder. And then I do this thing I call four corners, which is go to the park, take my shoes off, and then walk the four corners of the park doing a different exercise at each location.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very simple. I take my shirt off. I get natural sunlight. I do it. I've done it in the rain before too. I do it when it's cold. I don't let the weather dictate whether or not I do it, because one of my core beliefs is that aging is the aggressive pursuit of comfort. And the more aggressively we pursue comfort, the faster we age. We just collapse all of our defense mechanisms. We could go into a whole podcast on that alone. But if it's raining, I do the same thing. If it's hot, I do the same thing. If it's cold, I do the same thing. I don't let the weather dictate whether or not I'm out there. I actually kind of prefer some of the real inclement weather, because the park's by itself. I'll walk out there when it's wet, and I'll walk out there when it's dry.
What does that mean? I might derail you a few times here as we go through your morning routine, but when you say we derail our defense mechanisms, I assume you're talking about just not allowing ourselves to tap into hormetic stress or something like that.
Hormetic stress being the big one, but we have a tendency to believe that stress is very bad for the body, right? So we have to stop telling grandma not to go outside, it's too hot, not to go outside, it's too cold.
Yeah.
Just to lay down, just to relax, to eat at the first pang of hunger. Because as you know, if we don't load our bones, they don't strengthen. If we don't tear a muscle, it doesn't grow. If we don't challenge the immune system, it weakens. So in almost every case, physical stress strengthens the body, but it also strengthens the mind.
Yeah.
I mean, sick, fat, tired people don't build empires, right?
Yeah.
And so it really begins in the body before it travels to the mind. Same thing with neurotransmitters and gut health. That gut-brain connection is very much the same as a physical brain connection.
Yeah.
And so I believe that healthy hormetic stresses, thermal stresses, weight-bearing stresses are very good for the body. I mean, you want to live a long time, and I happen to have a core competency in the science of longevity and mortality. Lift heavy weight and stress the body on a regular basis.
Yeah. When you talk about your history in the science of mortality and longevity, and don't worry, we'll get back to some of the other cool things that we got up to this morning after the walk. But I would love to hear a little bit more about what got you interested in this. Because before I came to Miami, you and I talked on the phone. And I always thought you were just some biohacker who was interested in the body and, eventually took all the things you learned and started to do with other people. But you had a very interesting start. You were in insurance adjusting or something like that?
A very specific area of insurance, which was the science and the predictability of mortality. It's called probabilistic mortality modeling.
Okay.
So, if we got 5 years of medical records on you and 5 years of demographic data, we could tell the insurance company how long you had to live to the month. You see, because the database...
To the month. This wasn't like methylation clocks and Horvath aging and telomeres. This was just looking at epidemiological data.
Epidemiological data, but with the one thing you have to remember that insurance companies have that no other clinical study has, no other medical enterprise has, no other published trial has, no medical enterprise of any type has, is that they know the day, the date, the time, the location, and the cause of death for everyone that they've issued an annuity, a life insurance, or a reinsurance policy on, even a reverse mortgage.
Wow.
You wouldn't believe the number of financial services products that are actually based on how many more months you have left on earth. And so when you have the endpoint, you can trace it back to causality. You see, in a clinical study, we know that, for example, obesity shortens your lifespan by X number of years. Type 2 diabetes shortens your lifespan by X number of years. This is all data that's used on actuarial tables. How do we put somebody on an actuarial table? But when you talk about specific mortality, they have tens of millions of deaths, and they trace that endpoint back to its causality. If this database could see the light of day, it would permanently change the face of humanity. It would upend modern medicine in a way that would absolutely be catastrophic.
And that information is like private?
The insurance companies are the polar opposite of Google and Facebook. They collect voluminous amounts of information, but they don't share it with anybody. They use it to price financial service products against you. I mean, think about it. If they're going to take out a $25 million or $50 million life insurance policy on your life.
We're talking like a term life insurance policy?
We're usually talking about universal life policies
okay.
that are going to last until the day that you die. Right?
Okay.
So they don't expire after 10 years or 20 years.
They're trying to predict when that date is going to occur so that they don't get stuck with the bill.
Exactly. But if you think about it, they're taking $25 million or $50 million worth of risk on one variable. There's only a single variable that matters, and that's how many more months do you have left on Earth? How many more months are they going to predict they're going to collect that premium?
Okay. And you're working for one of these companies?
I was actually working for multiple companies. So we did life expectancies, and we did these probabilistic models to basically take a portfolio of life insurance that one life insurance company was going to acquire and let them know if the mortality predictions were accurate or not.
Okay.
Because think about it. If you put $25 million worth of risk on somebody's life and you don't collect enough premiums to offset that risk because your mortality prediction was
kind
wrong.
Of a shitty business model.
It's kind of a really shitty business model. And if you want to know how accurate they are, just look at the last financial services crisis. We had 364 banks failed. Not a single life insurance company failed. Not one.
Really?
Not a single life insurance company failed. This is how accurate and well reserved they are because they have perfected the science of mortality.
So what'd you find out?
If I was to boil my entire career down to one sentence, I say this all the time, it would be that the presence of oxygen is the absence of disease.
Presence of oxygen is the absence of disease.
Yes. We did not find a single disease etiological pathway that did not either have its roots in the absence of blood oxygen or was not severely exacerbated by the absence of blood oxygen.
Can you give me an example?
Hypoxia, all cancer begins in a hypoxic environment. Type 2 diabetes begins in a hypoxic
like the
environment.
Warburg effect, cancer generating energy anaerobically, producing lactic acid, tissue acidosis.
And then springing upon you to create that angiogenic effect to eventually provide oxygen to grow a tumor, but the genesis of that tumor begins in hypoxia.
Okay.
I mean, how does cancer decide where it's going to metastasize to? It looks for a focal area of hypoxia, and it sets up shop in that area.
Okay.
And if you look at anemia, sedentary lifestyle, these are leading causes of all-cause mortality. Sitting is the new smoking. But why is sedentary lifestyle and why has sitting become the new smoking? Because sedentary lifestyle is a foundation for hypoxia. The less we move, the less we breathe, the more poorly we manage oxygen. Not only the faster we're accelerating towards the grave, but the faster the parabolic curve of all-cause mortality. So we could predict the onset of and the severity of disease based on your hypoxic condition. If you have anemia, for example, and it's non-responsive because you have the MTHFR gene mutation, you don't respond to folic acid, you only respond to methylfolate, for example, and you have a cardiovascular condition, atherosclerosis, arterial sclerosis, you can predict how much more quickly that will accelerate based on a normal table of atherosclerotic progression.
Okay. And I know if I'm wondering this, other people might be also. But, of course, we seek out, in some cases, as health enthusiasts, hypoxia. Like you and I, when we were doing the breath work out on the porch, like we got to certain sections where we were blowing all of our air out and holding that for as long as possible. Or some people will do, I don't know if you've ever been like a CVAC chamber, right? Which is hypoxic. Or I even do like you do, exercise with oxygen therapy, but I have a little switch on that therapy device I use that pulls me into hypoxia, gets my pulse O2 down, like my blood oxygenation down, and then it goes back up once I get that surge of oxygen. But you're not saying that all hypoxia is bad, right?
No,
it seems
I'm
like
not
there's kind of like a hormetic effect to having periods of time with low oxygen.
No, systemic hypoxia is bad.
Okay.
Long duration hypoxia is bad. Short-term exposure to hypoxic conditions or even altitude can actually improve oxygen transport. If you look at the way that a healthy body responds to a hypoxic condition, it increases erythropoiesis, right? So that increase in erythropoiesis offsets altitude. Okay. Right? But if you weren't offsetting that altitude, and you put yourself in a hypoxic environment, your body didn't offset that oxygen deficit, you would have severe long-term consequences for that.
Now, besides a hypoxic state, and this might be a loaded question, I don't know, but I'm sorry, besides a sedentary state, like you alluded to with the sitting is the new smoking, what type of other factors have you identified that seem to be pretty associated with people being in this hypoxic state?
Anemic conditions, age-related sarcopenia that actually collapses the respiratory rate and the respiratory volume.
Just muscle loss and
muscle
the inability to carry oxygen due to lack of muscle.
Yes.
Okay.
Muscle is our metabolic currency.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a direct correlation between early onset disease and even early onset death and your muscle volume, the percentage of muscle that you have. I mean, muscle really is our metabolic currency. We're realizing now that muscle is more important in older ages than flexibility.
I've been starting to pay attention to that Dr. Gabriel Lyon, who does a lot of, she calls it muscle-centric medicine. I think she's writing a book about it. I'll have to get her on the podcast.
I'm a big fan. I follow her on Instagram too.
Yeah. So sarcopenia or loss of muscle would be one thing associated with hypoxia. Anemia. Sedentary lifestyle, anemia. And I assume by anemia, you don't just mean low iron.
I don't just mean low iron.
Like, because there's that guy Morley Robbins now who talks about the iron copper ratios and the issue with some people supplementing with iron and it causing things like hemochromatosis without adequate copper on board. So I assume it comes down to more than just like supplement with iron.
Yes, it comes down. I mean, that's a broad category. Okay. I mean, there is a lot of people that we would find that had an anemic condition, low red blood cell, low hemoglobin, and they were non-responsive to therapy. So, for example, take a patient that has a homozygous MTHFR gene mutation. They're poor folate metabolizers. These people don't respond to conventional therapies, folic acid, B12, and iron, which is normally what they would give somebody who's in an anemic condition. And so these become chronic. And now chronic anemia, if you look at the type 3 diabetes, one of the early links to Alzheimer's. In fact, in my 22-year career, I didn't see a single early onset Alzheimer's patient, not one, that did not have at least 10 years of elevated blood sugar prior to. And this myth that people are losing their memory is not really true. They're losing access to their memory. So it's not the memory that's actually fading. It's the access to the memory that's fading because neurosynaptic junctions get full of eventually amyloid plaques. But that viscosity changes a long time before you actually have these issues with memory. Which
is why a more stable source of fuel like ketones or coconut oil, et cetera, can be very beneficial for Alzheimer's or dementia because it's staving off the diabetic condition in the brain. You know what else I think?
Insulin resistance in the brain.
And I don't know if you've thought about this much at all before, but I think part of it, in addition to the presence of too much carbohydrate and glucose in neural tissue, it's also the lack of choline precursors that one gets from lots of healthy fats. There's a guy named Dwayne Goodenow who wrote a book called Breaking Alzheimer's. And that book goes into plasmalogen deficiencies, plasmalogen being these tiny fat-based molecules that he has found are heavily associated with onset of this type 3 diabetes. Turns out that the main precursor for plasmalogens is the type of choline that we'd find in eating a lot of grass-fed beef or walnuts and other seeds and nuts and avocados and olive oil and all these things we know are healthy for the brain. So it's kind of like that 1-2 combo of sugar excesses and plasmalogen deficiencies that seems to result in this type 3 diabetes onset.
No question.
And so back to the oxygen piece. So we got a sedentary lifestyle. We got sarcopenia. We have some form of anemia. Not necessarily everybody needs to go rush out and buy iron, but something related to MTHFR or iron copper or it's why I put raw liver in my smoothie every morning, which I'm gonna get you on the bandwagon for.
I'm not quite there yet.
I made you a smoothie this morning.
I feel pretty good right now. So
we'll get to the smoothie eventually because we got back from the walk and we eventually got to that. But what other biggies? While we're talking about the reasons for hypoxia, do you think you could recognize as the main ones for people to think about if there's any others?
Poor methylation, poor use of mitochondrial nitric oxide and oxygen at the mitochondrial level.
Okay.
And if you look at older ages and respiratory volumes, one of the things that we would look at is how well they ambulated. So if you take a patient that had, we had what was called morbidities and comorbidities.
Okay.
So if you had a certain disease condition, if you had type 2 diabetes and you would get a debit. If you were morbidly obese, you would get a debit. If you were hypertensive, you would get a debit. But if you put all of these debits into the same body, it's not 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. It's 1 + 1 + 1 = 10. And so we realized that the presence of oxygen was the absence of disease, and that the deficiency in oxygen was the presence of a lot of diseases, not only the onset of, but the severity of disease. And towards the tail end of my career, we started to delve deep into methylation pathways. And I think that methylation is one of the most overlooked areas in all of modern medicine, because it doesn't assume that what goes into your body and goes into mine and goes into everyone listening to this podcast is treated exactly the same.
Yeah.
Right. That's the biggest fallacy in modern medicine.
If I was going to come to you, how would you test me for methylation? Is this like one of those salivary genetic tests?
It's a salivary genetic test, methyl detox profile.
Okay.
You can get way down the rabbit hole of methylation. So what I prefer to do is look at the big 5 genes of actionable genes of methylation, because it's no use looking at genes where you can't supplement for their deficiency. Right.
So the actual. Would this be the alleles that you're looking at?
The genes and their suballeles. So, for example, MTHFR has 2 big alleles, C677T, A1298C. Those are the big known ones.
Okay.
But you look at people that have homozygous breaks, meaning both parents gave them the gene mutation.
Okay.
And depending on where that allele is, they have a predictable deficiency. And it's that deficiency that leads to some of the most common conditions that we accept as a consequence of aging. I mean, most people listening to this podcast are walking around right now somewhere between 55 and 60% of their true state of normal. And what I mean when I say that is, if they haven't looked at their own methylation pathways, if they're not supplementing for certain deficiencies. I'm not a huge believer in just supplementing for the sake of supplementing. I believe that we supplement for deficiency in the human body, and when we do, magnificent things happen. The majority of disease that we believe is genetically inherited disease doesn't have a genetic link at all. The majority of disease that's passed from generation to generation, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, hypercholesterolemia, hypothyroidism, depression, anxiety, ADD, ADHD, these conditions that run in families do not have a gene directly associated with that deficiency.
Okay.
What they have is a methylation pathway deficiency.
Okay.
And so what this means is they can't refine a certain raw material. They can't turn folic acid into methylfolate. Now they have a deficiency in methylfolate.
Which is why if you're having like a multivitamin or a cereal fortified with folic acid, it could be doing you more harm than good.
The worst thing, most people don't even realize that folic acid is an entirely man-made chemical, right? You can't find folic acid anywhere on the surface of the earth. It doesn't occur anywhere naturally in nature. Neither does, the most common form of B12, right? Cyanocobalamin, hydrogen cyanide-based B12. 3 forms of B12 occur naturally in nature: the adenosyl, the hydroxy, and the methyl. But the cyanide-based form, which generally comes from human sewage, from the sludge from human sewage, when you bind hydrogen cyanide to the cobalt metal and create a B12 molecule, the body not only doesn't recognize that, but has to convert it into a natural form of B12 to even use it. So a lot of times our supplements, because we use something called single-dose toxicity in the United States, we're one of the few civilized nations in the world that uses single-dose toxicity, right? Which means that if I give you something in a capsule or a pill and there is some arsenic in there, or there's some hydrogen cyanide in there, or there's some other toxic chemical in there, as long as it doesn't have an effect on you in that dose, then it's safe to give it to you. But we don't take into account cumulative dose toxicity, right? Nobody gets mercury poisoning from one sushi meal.
Yeah, we don't test what happens over time, is what you're saying.
We don't test what happens over time.
By the way, did you say that B12, one of the synthetic forms of it, is constituted from human sludge, like waste
Human
matter?
sewage, yeah.
So what do you mean?
So when we process human sewage, there's a foamy yellow substance that they discard, and it's called sludge. And that sludge is almost purely hydrogen cyanide. And so we can take that sludge, not we, certainly not me, but you can take that sludge, you can dry it into a powder, you bind it to the cobalt metal, which all B12 is cobalt metal. You bind it to the cobalt metal, and now you have cyanocobalamin, cyanide-based B12.
Wow.
And a lot of people say, "Oh, Gary, it doesn't matter. That dosage won't harm you." But it's not the dosage determines the poison. That's not true. The cumulative dosage determines the poison. If you're okay putting small amounts of mercury in your body every day, it won't be the small amounts that you put in every day. It will be the accumulation of that heavy metal that causes toxicity.
So obviously, we can talk about methylation alone for a couple of hours.
Yeah, we can way down the rabbit hole.
I want to give people the big bird's eye overview of some of these issues related to hypoxia. Mm-hmm. So we talked about sedentary lifestyle. We talked about sarcopenia. We talked about the methylation issues and anemia-related issues. One thing I've noticed that you're also very keen on is light exposure. Is there a link between light exposure and a hypoxic state?
Well, there's not a direct link between light exposure and a hypoxic state, but most people don't wake themselves up in the morning. They use stimulants to wake themselves up instead of waking naturally. Yeah. So, about first light. I'm not teaching you anything that you don't know, but that first 45 minutes of the day is very special blue light, not like the blue light that comes from your phone. Yeah. There's no UVA, there's no UVB. You can't look straight at the sun, but you can absorb those rays. You still create cholecalciferol, right? You still actually will generate vitamin D3 in the morning from morning light, but you don't have the
Really, you can
rays.
Still generate cholecalciferol even when it's kind of like red-ish outside?
Oh, you can still generate cholecalciferol on the cloudiest of days. You don't need much sunlight to generate vitamin D3.
A lot of people say you got to go out between like 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. to really get vitamin D, but you can actually get it in the morning.
To get the highest IUs per time spent. Yeah. But that's patently false. I mean, you generate cholecalciferol even through diffuse light that's passing through windows on a very, very, on a much more conservative basis. And then obviously it also depends on pigment of the skin. I mean, one of the reasons why we heard that COVID disproportionately affected minorities had nothing to do with their minority status. It had to do with the pigment of their skin and clinical deficiencies in vitamin D3.
Really?
So insurance companies have been on this for years. I mean, if I saw a dark pigmented, patient that was submitting for a life insurance policy that was clinically deficient in vitamin D3, had maintained this deficiency for a number of years, I would essentially extend that condition to being chronic. And so, one of the second things we discovered in the mortality space was not just that the presence of oxygen was the absence of disease, but the majority of conditions that people faced were what we called modifiable risk factors. What drove me crazy about my previous career was that I wasn't allowed to have any contact with the patient or any contact with the treating physician. So even if I saw life-threatening drug interactions, I couldn't pick up the phone.
Your hands are tied. You're just sitting there knowing all these issues and seeing the big picture that all these people who are dying early are hypoxic. And you, at that point, were you trained in biology? And
I was a human biologist.
Okay, so you knew all this
out
stuff.
Out of grad school.
But you were just handcuffed. All you could do was look at the data and you could do anything about it.
And even, I made more than one trip to human resources to say, I need to call this patient.
Yeah.
Because they've been misdiagnosed or they're about to take a contraindicated medication that's going to cause a thrombolytic event. And, I was threatened with prosecution. If I had contacted that patient, they said, we'll not only fire you, we'll prosecute you.
Yeah.
And I understand because I'm not licensed to practice medicine, so they didn't want some, human biologist sitting in a room looking at medical data. But I promise you, if I had called their doctor or called that patient and said, hey, stop taking the corticosteroid, start taking some vitamin D3, and I think you'll see that your joint pain goes away, because there's a perfect example of what I'm talking about with deficiencies leading to conditions people don't have. Misdiagnosis is the third leading cause of death in America. I won't say modern medicine is the third leading cause, but modern medicine's misdiagnosis kills more people than morbid obesity and diabetes combined. And it's third only to cancer and cardiovascular disease, right? So misdiagnosis kills more people with the exception of cardiovascular disease and cancer. And what
I assume you're not talking about somebody operating on your left leg instead of your right leg because it's labeled improperly. What would be an example of a misdiagnosis that would be
take a patient that has a severe deficiency in vitamin D3, for example. If you clinically deplete that nutrient from the human body for a decade or longer, that person will present with rheumatoid arthritis-like symptoms. Their history will read exactly parallel to rheumatoid arthritis. So more than hundreds of times, I saw patients with long-term clinical deficiencies in D3 go into the primary care physician, and they would say, look, doc, the soles of my feet, my ankles are sore when I get out of bed in the morning. My hips are stiff every day. My knees have been hurting for the last 2.5 years. It's steadily increased. I mean, recently it's hard for me to make a fist. And then doc goes, you know what? You've got rheumatoid arthritis. I'm going to hit you with some high-dose prednisone. I'm going to put you on what's called a corticosteroid. And you're just going to take these orally for the rest of your life, and you're going to be fine. Well, we knew in the insurance space, because we had mortality data, that if you started corticosteroids, you had 6 years and 1 day until you're having a joint replacement. It was so accurate, Ben, that we would, if you were a 60-year-old female misdiagnosed with rheumatoid that you didn't have because you had a deficiency in D3, I would advance your age 6 years and 1 day. I would schedule your joint replacement, and then I would begin to reduce what was called your ambulatory profile, how well you ambulated. As I reduce mobility, I can actually bring in all the diseases that exacerbate with a reduction in mobility. So now you can predict the onset of and the severity of disease. And now this person has been diagnosed with a condition they don't have, put on a medication they didn't need, which caused them to have a joint replacement that wasn't required. That reduced their ambulation, and it brought all-cause mortality closer from the future.
Yeah.
So now they were dying of conditions they never should have had because they had surgeries that they never needed, from medication that was never required, from a diagnosis that was based on their history.
That's interesting. Back to muscle-centric medicine. This is a study that I saw a couple of months ago. I don't recall what journal it was in, but it was highlighting a lot of the reasons for sarcopenia. And there are multiple in the lack of lifting weights, and I think vitamin D may have been in there, et cetera. But the two biggies were low amounts of bioavailable protein, and then the other one, and this one really leapt out to me. I was like, I never really thought about it that way, but it is interesting. It was gradual loss of muscle and fitness due to periods of immobility related to surgery, medical treatments, or injuries. Meaning, let's say that you're a nice, robust, like 30-year-old muscular gal or guy listening to this, and maybe 5 years from now, you got to get a little surgery for, I don't know, a kidney issue, and maybe a colonoscopy puts you up for 3 or 5 days after that, and then maybe you break your leg. So all these things string together, and you have like these periods of time over, let's say, when you're 30 to 60 during any given year, where you're just totally down and out for like 20 days. And those build up year after year after year. And it kind of makes sense intuitively, but until I saw it in this study in front of me, I'm like, oh, periods of inactivity related to medical issues are, in addition to low bioavailable protein, the number one cause for sarcopenia.
That's why all the great biohackers talk about consistency over time.
Yeah, it's consistency.
Right?
It is keeping yourself in the game, which is that it's huge versus doing the marathon workout on the weekends or whatever. Now, I want to learn a little bit more, because I'm intrigued about where you got to where you're at now with this whole 10x health, and you're probably aware of this. You're kind of blowing up. Like I've been seeing you all over the place. So what you're doing is obviously working, or you're paying the right people the right amounts of money. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. And so the question I have for you, though, kind of like back to the science of the hypoxia thing and back to the light. and what you were explaining about with the light, the importance of first light, the importance of natural spectrum sunlight. If you would have walked into my room this morning, I'm increasingly becoming like this. I'm like a red light addict, right? So
am I.
I travel with a red light headlamp, and that's the only way I use to get around the house during the day or during the morning, right? So it's all red light, plus my red light glasses, right? So my body's just basically bathed in sunrise. Even if I'm at a hotel or I got to walk down to the lobby to get a coffee or whatever, it's all red light for like the first hour of the day before I hit the big lights, because typically I'm up around 5 or so. So my reasoning is until the sun actually comes up, I want to keep fooling my body that we're in no sun or sunrise. And then I showed you that wraparound red light thing that I have. I forget the name. It's a Kineon is the name of the company that makes it. I wrap that around my neck, right? And this is in the first hour after I'm getting up. So all of the blood going through my neck and my carotid is getting blasted with red light. And then I have a little travel-based red light. People have probably seen, like Juve makes one called the Go. I have one that Dr. John Lawrence gave me last week that's got the little red. And so it basically is like putting the sunrise on in your bedroom. And so I'm all red light for that first hour of the day. Now, these are all technologies. We'll talk more about some of the cool technologies you have here, like some full red light beds.
I'm a huge fan of those technologies.
So for this concept of first light, do you think that there's an advantage to that I'm still getting benefit from that versus what we did this morning and going out in full spectrum sunlight and sitting on your balcony? Do you use these red light devices when you first wake up?
I do. I do the first light. I do the walk in the morning, and I believe in doing weights when I'm fed. Okay. So I usually do weight workouts later in the afternoon,
which we're going to go do after this. We'll be crushing the weights.
This podcast is over. We're going to go crush it. But then I get back and I do what's called the Superhuman protocol, which is essentially taking all of the good things from the outside and bringing it in. I believe we get 3 major things from Mother Nature. We get magnetism, we get oxygen, we get light.
Magnetism, oxygen, and light.
Those are the 3 big things we get from Mother Nature. And the further we get away from those 3 things, the faster the onset of all-cause mortality.
It kind of begs the question real quick. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay.
But when you say magnetism, oxygen, and light, and you found in these insurance actuarials that hypoxia was one of the big issues associated with mortality. Do you think that magnetism and light should have been on that list as well, or are magnetism and light kind of like the precursors to oxygenation?
They're precursors to oxygenation, because if you think about how oxygen's transported in the body, and then the delivery system, not only just to the cell wall, but into the mitochondria, which actually occurs more through the water, mitochondrial water, than it does through direct oxygen entering the mitochondria. But if you look at the degradation of the oxidative state of the body, right, a lot of this has to do with the charge, the polarity on the surface of the cell. Okay. And not to get too technical, but if you look at a red blood cell. So let's get technical for a second. So if you look at a red blood cell, and we're going to do some dark field microscopy here after this. If you look at a red blood cell, and the surface of that cell has a charge, and just like a magnet, if 2 cells have similar charges, they repel. If they have opposite charges, they attract. It's pH stands for potential hydrogen. This is a charge. Right? That's why it's a complete fallacy that we can get alkaline from drinking alkaline water. We get alkaline by changing the charge of the body through low Gauss current, through grounding, through earthing. Discharging into the earth or discharging through a PEMF mat, low Gauss PEMF mat, is the safest and the most natural and the fastest way to alkalize, repolarize the charge of the cellular structures in the body.
I never really thought about this. So you're basically making the case that alkalization is synonymous with or linked to repolarization.
No question. It's linked to potential hydrogen. That's pH. The scale of pH is based on the potential of hydrogen. So what this means is, let's say you have a group of red blood cells and they're all hanging out in the bloodstream together. Yeah. And they have similar charges. And they will repel. They'll slide around like hard-boiled eggs.
Right, like protons with a positive charge.
Like protons with a positive charge. So what happens is you have a lot more surface area now for that cell to take in nutrients, to expel nutrients, to have oxygen from the serum of the blood enter a cell. So for cells to shuttle oxygen through the bloodstream, they need to have more surface area. To increase the surface area, you need to create cellular separation. To create separation, you need to have the right charge.
And a higher pH, meaning higher potential hydrogen, more of these protons pushing each other apart, expanding the cell.
Right. Or else they start to clump up.
Yeah.
And everywhere they touch, you lose that surface area twice. You lose it on the cell, or you lose it on either cell that's touching. Now, what happens when these cells start to travel around the bloodstream in clumps? I'm not talking about coagulated blood. I'm talking about coalesced red blood cells. So now you have these, because they haven't done earthing or grounding or red light or PMF, and they've been traveling, and they live in a condo like I do on the 27th floor, and they fly 3 days a week and they'll get a lot of static electricity. They're wearing 2-inch thick rubber-soled shoes, so there's no discharge going on. So now if you look at this blood, you'll see that the red blood cells are kind of all clumped up and stuck together, like too many cars trying to
you
take
see that through these microscopes you have sitting right over here.
Yes,
he's not joking, folks. His whole condo is like littered with these microscopes and crazy.
I love
it's like
this
half lab, half biohacking condo. so you could see this.
I made my cameraman do it last week. I actually pricked his finger, put the blood on there, and you could see, because the microscope's looking down through the blood, you could see all the blood kind of stacked up and clumped together. Now, you lay on a PEMF mat and take your blood 5 minutes after getting off a PMF mat. Just do a 20-minute low Gauss session, and you'll see that all the red blood cells have separated. Now I have more surface area for oxygen, and that's why I do EWOT, exercise with oxygen therapy, after getting on a PMF mat. Alkaline.
That's why.
First.
I was wondering about the order, because we slept on PMF mats last night. You're one of the few guys who have hung out with who actually has a PMF mat under their bed. Your brand's
and
different
in my
than
guest
mine.
bed, you got use of it last
and your
night
guest bed, which was amazing. And by the way, I just realized, for those of you listening, I didn't yet tell you where the show notes are, where I'll have a video of all this stuff. But it's bengreenfieldlife.com/Breca. That's Gary's last name, BRECKA. bengreenfieldlife.com/Breca. So by utilizing the PMF, and of course by going outside barefoot like we did today with the earthing and the grounding, we're reducing the amount of clumping by allowing for popular depolarization of the cells. And that then allows for better oxygen flow and a more alkaline state. And would that theoretically be something that is accelerated by exposure to light photons, or is that something that allows the light photons to kind of like charge up the mitochondria better?
Allows the light photons to charge up the mitochondria.
Okay.
So remember I said we get three things from Mother Nature: magnetism, oxygen, and light. We get magnetism from the earth.
Yeah.
Earthing, grounding. It's a very real thing.
Yeah, or PMF is bad. I like to think of it as like earthing on steroids. Right?
Yes, it's earthing on steroids. And if you live in a condo or you spend a lot of time on a plane, you have to have a PMF.
Yeah.
So you get magnetism from the earth, which actually creates alkalinity. And then you move to this EWOT, exercise with oxygen therapy. So we use 95% O2 under mild oxygen. Just what you did this morning, 3-minute cycle with a 30-second sprint. This will raise not only your partial pressure, essentially the volume of oxygen in the bloodstream, but it will also, your SpO2, this will also raise your pulse oxygen, the amount of oxygen in the red blood cell. And now once you flood the blood with oxygen, then under mild exercise, because we want to create an oxygen demand, then you lay in a red light therapy bed.
So it's PMF, then the exercise with oxygen therapy or some type of oxygen protocol, then it's red light. That's the gold standard.
That's why we call it Superhuman.
I'm going to repeat that one more time for people. That is basically, if you take nothing else from this interview, this is Gary's Superhuman protocol. PMF, and if you don't have access to that, earthing or grounding, and then let's say you don't have exercise with oxygen therapy, you could at least do breath work.
Yes.
Anything that's going to introduce more oxygen to the body. We'll talk about EWOT a little bit more here briefly. And then you finish that up with red light or sunlight.
Take your shirt off and get outside.
And if you're totally free, if you like you don't have the money, or you don't have all the fancy biohacking equipment and you're listening in, you could literally go outside barefoot or lay on your back outside. And then you could do breath work in that same scenario, do a breath work walk, and be doing that in the sunlight, or finish up with red light. And that 1, 2, 3 protocol, if somebody could do that every day, they'd feel better.
Oh my God, they would feel so much better.
And then the biohacks stack that and concentrate it and make it more effective.
Exactly. I mean, you stack it with that equipment. One of the reasons why, I started a wellness franchise 7 years ago with my fiance when I left the mortality space. It was called Streamline Medical Group. We ended up treating a patient named Grant Cardone.
Grant Cardone.
Okay. And Grant Cardone had such an astounding response to the therapeutic protocol we put him on that he and his partner Brandon decided to acquire us September of last year, and we became 10X Health. And so now we're 10X Health, and the idea is to take expensive modalities like, that equipment's $150,000. I mean, I don't expect anyone to put $150,000 with equipment in their house.
You'd be surprised. You ought to meet some of the people who listen to this podcast.
Okay, so if you,
but anyway.
so go to @Gary Brecka on my Instagram, and I'll be happy to sell you the equipment. But the idea is, if I really wanted to touch the face of humanity, really, really make an impact on mankind, it's got to be available to everybody at a reasonable price. So we're putting 1,000 of these clinics around the country, 20 in every state. And essentially, Grant Cardona's helped to bankroll that, and Brandon Dawson's helped to build the foundation for it, for us to scale, so that there'll be 20 of these locations in every state. People can come in and use it for a monthly fee instead of, paying to have the equipment in their house.
Yeah.
So that's the whole idea behind 10X Health, and that combined with blood testing, combined with genetic testing, which I'm a huge fan of. There's lots of great genetic tests out there. We do one through Cell Science Systems that looks at the 5 actionable genes and the suballeles. You can get 85% of the people, 90% of to their destination of optimal health.
That's what I was telling you on our walk. I like to cut through the genetic confusion. I use one called Strategene by Dr. Ben Lynch. It identifies the 9 so-called dirty genes, like the nitric oxide pathways, methylation pathways, histamine processing pathways, etc. Because a lot of people don't need to know whether they have propensity for brown eyes or blue eyes.
Exactly, or detached earlobes.
Actionable data.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you're doing quantification as well on a pretty robust level. If someone were to come to you and work with you, or someone were to go to one of these new 10X Health systems, they're going through a whole battery of tests.
They're going to go through mainly 2 tests up front. They're going to get 64 biomarkers looked at in the blood. Okay. They're going to get 5 genetic markers looked at in their genes and the alleles. In those 64 biomarkers, we're basically looking for hormone balance, glycemic control, blood sugar control, and nutrient deficiencies.
Okay.
And then in the genetic test, which is what I love so much because you do it once in your lifetime. It's your genes. They'll never change. So you don't have to guess at what you're deficient in. You can know what your body is incapable of methylating. Some people do better on certain forms of B12, B complexes, SAMEs, and methylated folates, 5-methylfolates. And it's astounding what happens to human beings when you just put the raw material back into their body so that it can do what it was designed to do. MTHFR has been proven, linked to all kinds of conditions that we just accept as a consequence of aging: ADD, ADHD, OCD, manic depression, bipolar, mood and emotional disorders. These neurotransmitters imbalances come very often from methylation. We take simple amino acids like tryptophan and phenylalanine, and we methylate these into neurotransmitters. And if methylation is broken, we have these deficiencies, mainly in our gut. But if you don't have serotonin in your gut, you can't have serotonin in your brain.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of books written on the gut-brain connection, but the gut-brain connection is a connection of methylation. And it's very simple to fix this. A lot of people are walking around, like I said, 55 or 60% of their true state of normal because they're guessing at what they need to supplement with. They have a COMT mutation, for example, catechol O-methyltransferase. These people have one of 2 types of sleep patterns, Ben. They'll either lay down exhausted to go to bed, and they can't fall asleep because their mind keeps them awake, or they fall asleep and their mind wakes them up. Because it's important to understand, and I know that you know this, but we don't just create thought in our mind. We also dismantle thought, right? And it's just as important to be able to dismantle thought, degrade thought, as it is to create it. If not, the mind gets clouded. We call this ADHD, right? There's attention deficit disorder, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is not an attention deficit at all. It's an attention overload disorder. It's not that people that have ADD have an inability to pay attention. They have an inability to pay attention to so many things.
Yeah.
And so what if we could actually degrade thought at the same pace that we create thought? You'd stop hearing people say things like, I work well under pressure. Because when you say I work well under pressure, what you really mean is I lack the ability to set priorities internally. So I use external pressure to set my priorities.
Yeah.
And we would be able to lay down to go to sleep, and our mind would quiet instead of waking up. Right, because people that have a COMT gene mutation, this catechol-O-methyltransferase gene mutation,
COMT,
they don't degrade catecholamines.
Right,
and so they have this excitatory state in the mind, but the body's exhausted.
Yeah,
and so they have a hard time quieting their mind, and so if they put the right amino acid balance into the body, they find that the mind quiets. That's why I'm a huge fan of your amino acids.
I was going to say it's just kind of funny because like a lot of what I do from a supplementation standpoint. It's probably big three that come to my mind you're talking about right now is the essential amino acids. You know, I had a big cup of those Keon aminos before.
I have one around here somewhere right now.
So great for the neurotransmitters, for a lot of the methylation issues, like the shotgun approach. And then raw liver in my smoothie every morning for
Still
the
working
iron
on that
copper
one.
ratio.
Still working on that one.
I'll give you the recipe. I'll swear you're eating ice cream. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Once you get the right stuff in it. And then the last one, and this is one that I think one reason you and I feel so good today, that kind of amplifies a lot of the things we've been talking about when it comes to the light and the oxygen, because it donates electrons to the mitochondrial transport chain. It pairs very well with, if you have enough NAD in your system, is methylene blue. So you and I took some oral methylene blue this morning and then charged up with the red light. And that stuff's fantastic. I think it pairs very well with what you're doing with this Superhuman protocol.
Oh, no question. I mean, in the Superhuman protocol, the magnetism, oxygen, and light, when you get in red light, certain wavelengths of red light, I mean, basically all wavelengths of light do the same thing. They just do it at different depths. Right, so some are very good for collagen, elastin, fibrin in the skin. Others are good for circulation, microvascular circulation. Other wavelengths are good for inflammation. Probably the most therapeutic, in my opinion, is the 810 nanometers, because that's generally considered the deepest depth of penetration. But what that wavelength does, that's astounding, is it passes through the mitochondrial wall. It kicks out a gas called mitochondrial nitric oxide and forces oxygen to dock. And you know what happens in the mitochondria when you allow oxygen to enter that cycle? You have a 16-fold increase in cellular energy. Jeez. So imagine if we had a 16-fold increase in cellular energy in 32 trillion cells. Imagine the level of waste elimination, repair, detoxification, regeneration. And these are simple things, using red light to force oxygen into the mitochondria, to upstage the mitochondria so it can eliminate waste, repair, detoxify, and regenerate.
So when it comes to the testing that you do, you got these 5 genes that you'll test for. You've got the 64 blood markers. And then obviously
that's the foundation.
It's going to change from person to person. But do you have like a specific diet/supplementation program that you find yourself referring to over and over again, as far as like the general broad-based diet seems to work well for a lot of these people who have hypoxia-related conditions?
I do. I mean, a lot of it has to do with lowering high glycemic carbohydrates, no earth-shattering information there, because if you look at, you have to remember that the digestive tract is like a 30-foot long conveyor belt. And what you put on it at one end before it exits the opposite end, as it exits the stomach and then makes its way to the rectum and exits the rectum. In that 30-foot long span, the level of high glycemic carbohydrate is directly related to the amount of oxygen that is diverted to your gut. Remember, the
level of high glycemic carbohydrate intake is directly correlated to the amount of oxygen that your gut needs, meaning the more sweet carbs you eat, the more oxygen gets diverted to your gut?
No doubt. That's exactly right.
Interesting.
So high glycemic meals require significantly more oxygen to digest.
Really?
And they will require more blood flow as well. So if you actually stood in front of a thermograph and you ate a very high glycemic meal versus, let's say, a purely ketogenic meal, you would see that your head, which is normally glowing red and orange, and there's an orange-red area around your heart, nice warm blood showing a concentration of blood around the heart and in the brain, you would see these areas begin to cool. You'd actually see them start to turn yellow and green. Wow. Because the amount of blood in the system is fixed. So it can't be here and be here at the same time. It can't be in the gut and be in the brain at the same time. So if you divert it with high glycemic carbohydrates, you will steal it from the brain. It has to borrow from somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. And so the simple truth is that you have to decide if that food's serving you or stealing from you. And so I mean, try to eat a big bowl of pasta and some half a loaf of bread, and see how you feel after that meal.
Yeah.
The energy drain is because you have reduced the oxidative state. Right?
Yeah.
You become marginally.
I don't know. I usually
hypoxic.
just feel Italian after a meal like that. Yeah.
You just start speaking with an accent.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Maybe you'd be able to survive it, but most people are exhausted. But
yeah.
So this is why, in general, I try to just avoid high glycemic foods. And because you have to decide, do you want energy or do you want taste? And very often people they don't look at food as service. They don't look at a food item and say, is this going to serve me or is this going to steal from me?
Yeah.
And we let these thieves into our house, and they do exactly what they're designed to do, which is steal from you.
Yeah.
And so this type of eating also exacerbates hypoxic condition. So people that have low blood oxygen to begin with will eat a high glycemic meal and then they'll crash.
So you tend to be more low carb, a little bit like keto in your approach from a dietary standpoint.
Low carb, high healthy fat, no seed oils. I mean, very basic in my opinion. I eat a tremendous amount of coconut oil, olive oil, nuts, avocados.
Yeah, I saw that. You even have beef tallow on your counter.
Beef tallow. And I don't eat a lot of high glycemic fruits and high glycemic foods.
Now, what about water? Is there a certain kind of water that would allow you to be more oxygenated, or certain things you should pay attention to from a hydration standpoint?
Yes. So I have a water filtration system. It's a hydrogenated water.
Okay.
Right? Because remember, if you have excess hydrogen, you actually can change polarity, right? You can change charge.
Okay.
So hydrogen water can alkalize you.
Yeah.
Alkaline water does not alkalize you, right?
Because there's not higher amounts of hydrogen in just alkaline water.
Right.
It's just passing over a metal plate and using electrolysis to alkalize it, but there's not increased hydrogen content.
That's right, and you think about it in chemistry, something cannot donate its properties and also maintain them.
Yeah.
So if it were true that alkaline water would transfer its properties, then it would by design become acidic if it gave up the properties that made it alkaline.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So you can't have a glass of salt water and a glass of regular water and take the salt out of one and put it to the other and still have it in its origin, right?
Yeah.
So this is why the alkaline water theory falls apart.
Super into homeopathy or something like that. Water maintains the inflammation.
I feel like hope we're not getting too sciencey for these guys and putting them to sleep. And somebody,
no, this is great.
But the truth is that hydrogen water. I'm a huge fan of hydrogen water because it can donate properties and it improves emulsification and gut biome and all kinds of things.
Is it true that you could dissolve oxygen in water? Because I've heard about that. I'm like,
I'll tell you my experience with it, which was pretty profound because the human biologist in me says no, right? I mean, if you take if you pop a top off a Perrier, you get the, and then if you shake it up and keep doing it, pretty soon it's going to flatten out. So in theory, suspending a gas in a liquid is long term is not possible, but there is a type of water called cakewan water or cocoon water. Dr. Lyon's research is pretty
cocoon
compelling.
water. What was the other thing called? Cakewan?
K-A-Q-U-N, but it's pronounced cocoon, but it's K-A-Q-U-N.
Okay.
And there's actually one of these facilities, and they have baths full of this water in Vegas. And I went out to this facility, highly skeptical, although I had read Dr. Lyon's research and was excited to go out and bathe in an oxygen tub that was perfused with oxygen through a patented method of suspending oxygen in water, linking oxygen molecules together, O2 linked to O2, linked to O2, linked to O2. And then theoretically, the partial pressure of water on your skin is 600 millimeters of mercury. The partial pressure in the veins is about 140. So this gradient allows for oxygen.
Driving it through the gradient from high to low.
Yes. Driving it from high
by
to
being
low.
submerged in the water.
Being submerged in the water.
Interesting.
So when I got there, I said, okay, if this oxygen is moving from that water through my skin into my bloodstream, I should be able to measure it in a few ways, right? I should be able to measure my pulse oxygen.
Yeah.
It should skyrocket. I should be able to measure my partial pressure, my SpO2, how much oxygen's in my bloodstream. I should see a reduction in my blood pressure, both systolic and diastolic, should marginally come down. And my resting pulse should also fall. And I was skeptical that all of those things would happen. And without an exception, every single one of those metrics moved dramatically.
That's crazy. And not drinking it.
Not
actually
drinking.
So you could technically like create some kind of like a water filtration system that puts this stuff in like bathtubs.
That's what he's done.
Or hot tubs or even like cold pools or something like that.
Yes. And so you bathe in this.
That's pretty interesting.
Obviously for wounds, but I mean, there's some tremendous outcomes they've had with cancer patients. Certainly with surface conditions, eczema, psoriasis, and wounds.
Yeah.
But the fact that I was able to measure an increase in my partial pressure while I got an increase in pulse oxygen, right? So the oxygen had to be coming from somewhere because when I was breathing, it wasn't moving. And then a reduction in my blood pressure and a significant drop in my pulse rate. My pulse rate went from resting in the low 60s, 60, 61 into the low 40s.
Is this stuff available already? This ability to be able to bathe in this stuff?
Yeah, you can bathe in it, and you can go to Las Vegas and bathe in this.
I'll find links for you guys. For maybe you guys want to try this out.
It's a cool spot.
Okay, so yeah, I was telling you when we were walking, because we haven't spent a lot of time together. We've talked on the phone a few times. I finally flew in last night. We've hung out a little bit. I see that you practice what you preach. I'm not just blowing smoke. I appreciate that. A lot of guys don't. They write the blogs and do the podcast, but they don't actually do it. You having such deep experience and having all these things that we've already tried today, I don't know about you, I feel fantastic.
I feel great, dude. I really do. I was saying that earlier, man. I feel freaking amazing.
We did the breath work and the methylene blue and the outside walk, but then we started to use some of your biohacking technologies. And so I want to ask you a few kind of like rapid fire questions based on this Superhuman protocol, if that's cool.
Yeah, fire it up.
So step one is we want to get polarization occurring properly and declumping the cells through some form of grounding or earthing or PMF.
Yes.
You talked about going outside barefoot. I talked about maybe putting some straps on the bottom of your shoes, using those earth runners. Obviously, it's not rocket science to get outside and be in touch with the planet.
Right.
Now, when it comes to the technologies that you think work really well for PMF, what are some of your favorites for like biohacking technologies? So
my favorite is the Pure Wave. I've looked at a lot of different PMF technologies. I'm not saying that other PMF technologies are not great.
That's a mat.
It's a mat.
Okay.
So I like that one for because I measured the low Gauss current, and we actually did some dark field testing of our own, and we actually found significant improvements in blood viscosity and also in the clumping of red blood cells, and that's visible. And then the EWAT system, exercise with oxygen therapy, I use a Hypermax, which is essentially an oxygen concentrator with a timer on it. You turn the timer on, it fills it.
Actually, before we get to EWAT, I want to talk about that. But what about, so I've got this necklace on somewhere that you gave me. It makes PM. What about portable PMF? Because a lot of people are going to travel with the mat. I travel a lot. I want PMF when I travel.
This one I like.
And there's like lightweight grounding mats. But this thing's called a bubble.
This is the bubble from Centropics. Yeah, it's the smallest PMF in the world.
So in the past, I've used the Flex Pulse by Dr. William Pollack. This thing's kind of cool. You're just hanging around your neck.
Hanging around your neck. 7 hertz, and it's creating a pulse electromagnetic field all the time. Okay. So you don't have to wait till you're home. You can wear PMF and you can have that as a mat. You could obviously travel. Grounding and earthing mats, I don't know if you've traveled with those before, but they're pretty light. Yeah, they're very light.
And I was going to tell you,
is pretty light too,
one thing to think about is the alternating current frequencies that go through a lot of homes and condos like this. I'm a fan of using dirty electricity filters if you're going to use PMF or grounding or earthing mats. I just think it's smart, just so you reduce the amount of power surges. But nonetheless, you said the power wave, this bubble thing, Pure wave, and then grounding or earthing shoes, getting outside barefoot. And then you started talking about the EWAT. Tell me about the protocol we did today and what all you use for exercise with oxygen therapy, right?
Yes, EWAT. Exercise with oxygen therapy. And we do this with a lot of our professional athletes that we're trying to get to the next level. I'm working with a lot of athletes that are playing in the league right now that are dominating their game. Some of them are very public about their relationship with me, some are not. But we are measuring their performance using magnetism, oxygen, and light, which is NSF certified. It doesn't, it's not considered performance enhancement. It's considered reparative, regenerative. And we're seeing incredible results with tissue repair, regeneration, protein synthesis, increase in protein synthesis and muscle repair, and performance. But not, EWAT is a 10, 11 minute time frame where you're
went by super fast. You're not
Hyperoxic.
drained afterwards, like after a big workout. You're
Because
energized.
too much oxygen over too long a period of time will actually drive red blood cell count down, and that's the opposite of what you want. But for a short period of time, it took you 10.5 minutes to do it today.
Right. It was 3 minutes.
With
3 minutes,
sprint.
30 seconds effort after each, breathing pure oxygen.
Yeah, breathing, not pure oxygen,
Or
95%.
high oxygen. And it's just like you have an Airdyne bike, you have a mask next to it. I'll put pictures for folks at bengreenfieldlife.com/Breca. I told you my protocol is kind of sexy too. Like I got the Vasper, which is a blood flow restriction,
right,
and the grounding and the earthing because you're grounded to the plates on the Vasper, and then the full body exercise. And I keep the Live O2 next to that because I got a switch. And so during my recoveries, like the long periods, you go hypoxia, and then during the efforts you go hyperoxia and flood the tissues with oxygen. And that's 21 minutes. I felt as though your 12-minute protocol beat me up a little less than maybe I'm going too long with the Vasper protocol, but nonetheless, the takeaway message here for people is it's high intensity interval training with periods of time during that high intensity training where you have some kind of a mass to deliver higher amounts of oxygen to the body.
And 10.5 minutes is all you need. You breathe 900 liters of 95% O2.
Now, something I've always wondered, what if you were to use, let's say you didn't have the money or you don't have access to the oxygen delivery system mask that you wear. What if you just, during the easy periods, were to wear something like a training mask, or like resist oxygen intake or even breathe through a straw? Do you think you could still get some effects by then during the hard efforts, just like opening your mouth and taking the training mask off and breathing?
I absolutely do. I mean, if you look at the cyclical breathing methods of Wim Hof, you look at exercise with oxygen therapy, a lot of these have the same foundational concept, which is one, create a demand, and then two, answer that demand. And what I mean by that is we know that we can't just eat a bunch of calcium and have strong bones, right? You have to load a bone. And then have calcium there to help build it. Right. We know that you can't just eat a bunch of protein and build big muscles. Right. You have to tear a muscle, and then you have to have the protein available to repair it.
Right.
The same thing is true with oxygen. You just can't sit and hyperventilate and flood the body with oxygen. What you have to do is create an oxygen demand. So the idea behind EWOT is exercise is putting an oxygen demand on the body. And then when it's same as a breath hold. In a Wim Hof method, for example, exhale, breath, hold. Why are we exhaling and holding our breath? Well, you're resetting carbon dioxide receptors. You're actually driving the level of that gas up. Now, when you breathe in, the tissues just they take it up.
So it might not be perfect, but you could basically, the way you want to think about it is this: during an exercise session, try to deprive yourself of oxygen. Then throw in a few high-intensity intervals where you're just opening up the portals and flooding yourself with oxygen. And you're at least, even if you don't have the fancy equipment, kind of like going outside barefoot gives you a taste of the PMF. Doing that will give you a taste of the EWOT.
You can hold your breath and do push-ups to exhaustion.
That's a great idea.
And breath work. Then hold your breath and do push-ups to exhaustion, to failure.
Okay.
And then, breath work again.
Got it.
Similar
now,
concept.
The last part of this Superhuman protocol, and I want to be sure we touch on this, is the light. Now, people have seen me stand in front of these Juve light panels. I told you about the thing I wear around my neck. You have some interesting light things. You got like this sauna that massages and does light, and you have this whole bed. Tell me about your light stuff.
So the light stuff is, I tested a lot of light beds. I did like meter testing. We did mitochondrial nitric oxide testing to actually see if that light was actually kicking the gas out of the mitochondria, which you can pick up in the blood, because if the gas is leaving, that oxygen's docking. And so we use the 10X, our company. We actually acquired a stake in a distributor named DaVinci Medical. We acquired a 50%.
DaVinci Medical.
DaVinci.
Okay.
Like the Da Vinci Code, Da Vinci Medical. And we source a Theralite 360 light bed, one of the most powerful light bed on the market right now. It's about 125 milliwatts of radiance more powerful than anything else you can get on the market. It's got 45,000 light diodes. It has a top and a bottom. They actually changed the light intensity to make up for the arc in the bed. And you lay in this thing for 20 minutes, and just like you experienced today, I mean, there's nothing like it. I
can feel the nitric oxide like coming out my fingertips.
Yes.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
That thing's powerful.
And when when it's blowing nitric oxide out like that, that means oxygen is taking its place.
Yeah.
And when you just do EWAT and then you lay in that red light bed, it's like plugging yourself into a light socket.
Before too,
I know, that's why I feel so, I can barely sit still right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what about the one that has the is like a sauna? Like I climbed inside it, it almost looked like one of those hyperthermic units they use in cancer treatment centers. But it's like a pod, and you climb inside, you crawl inside.
Oh, that thing's like being in your mother's womb. I love that thing. It's called the Hyper T sauna, and essentially
Hyper T.
Okay. Right. It's also by Da Vinci 10X. We have a version of this, and it's a pod that you get in, and you open it and you close it. There's 3 things I like about it. Number one, it's infrared, near infrared sauna. It has a massage unit, so it's actually vibrating, and it has heat. So it's not just the infrared, near infrared, but it also actually has heat vents that will heat you up while your head stays cool. I see a lot on, Instagram and circulating around in social media, these guys that get in 37-degree water for prolonged periods of time. They go under, they breathe through a straw, they breathe through a snorkel, and sometimes they'll stay underwater for 10, 12 minutes, 16 minutes at 37 degrees. I'm not a big fan of cooling the brain off like that or heating the brain up too hot, right? I mean, when you're in a hot sauna, 180, 200 degrees, and you're in there for really prolonged periods of time, that's not necessarily the best thing for your brain.
Right.
And
obviously the hypoxia induced by long-term cold for the brain could reduce oxygen delivery to the brain if overdone.
Yeah.
And then if we know that hyperthermia, as used in oncology, is cytotoxic to cells, theoretically, the fragility of the cells and neural tissue could respond in an unfavorable manner.
In a very
to
unfavorable
high amounts
way.
of heat in that environment.
No doubt.
So the head is sticking out. That stays cool, but the body's in there just getting blasted with light.
Yeah, your body's getting blasted, your head stays cool. So now you get your sweat on, and then I go right from that into the cold plunge.
Yeah, which we did today.
Which we did today. Yeah. We actually got in there together.
Yeah. Good job, man. And we'll have videos of this all up for you guys. I know you probably have tons of questions for Gary. I know we're starting to run up against time here. But I'm going to put all the show notes and the video and everything at bengreenfieldlife.com/Breca. And Gary, just to keep people a little bit intrigued here, because I'm intrigued. So from here, we're going on to do you have a special like ozone treatment or something like that you do? Okay.
Yeah, we're going to do ozone IV therapy after this.
Ozone IV.
Got one of our nurses coming over.
Great for energy.
Yeah. We're going to do about 65 gamma, 2 passes.
Okay.
And then we're also going to do some L-carnitine. L-carnosine via IV. And the combination of those two is just amazing. So that's our next biohack.
What's the carnosine for?
So it's carnosine is actually used for a lot of different delayed onset muscle soreness, DOMS. I mean, it actually significantly reduces DOMS. It's also an amino acid that's excellent when you're doing other modalities like Myers cocktails and other vitamins. I mean, it's a readily available amino acid. It improves athletic performance. I actually just like to run carnosine on its own before I do ozone.
Yeah.
You feel absolutely amazing. And ozone therapy is, there's nothing novel about ozone therapy, but that third oxygen molecule is really like a missile for inflammation and free radical oxidation. That's why you feel so good after ozone. I mean, some of the clinical studies where they used it in COVID treatments and for viral pathogens are really astounding. I mean, efficacy above 90%.
Wow.
So we're going to do some ozone, some carnosine.
And then you lift weights.
And then we're going to lift weights.
This guy practices what he preaches, folks. That's why I like Gary, and I'm just now getting to know him, but he's the real deal. And if you aren't following what he does, I'll link to his 10X Health Systems, his website, his Instagram, as well as the video that accompanies this show, because we had a video crew following us around, a couple of fantastic guys who filmed some of these modalities that we're doing. So I'll put that in the show notes as well. Hit subscribe, leave a ranking, leave a review if you got a little extra time. It means way more than you might think. Thank you so much.